Commander Sarah Chun watched the holographic display with growing unease as the massive alien fleet positioned itself around Earth's orbital defense grid. The hegemony vessels were sleek, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around their edges, making them appear almost ethereal against the starfield backdrop. Each ship was easily 10 times the size of humanity's largest dreadnought, and there were hundreds of them. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communication station aboard the U.S. Defiance, humanity's flagship and the pride of the United Earth Space Command. "Put it through," Chin replied, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. This was humanity's first contact with an alien civilization, and it wasn't going according to any of the scenarios they had prepared for. The main view screen shimmered, then displayed the image of a being that defied easy description. The alien was tall and willowy, with 4 arms that moved with unsettling grace. Its skin appeared to be a shifting pattern of colors that reminded Chun of oil on water, and where its face should be was a collection of geometric shapes that pulsed with soft light. When it spoke, the universal translator rendered its words in a voice that somehow managed to sound both melodious and condescending. "Greetings, primitive inhabitants of the third planet," the being said, and Chun could almost hear the sneer in its tone despite the translation. "I am Supreme Coordinator Vexhai of the Galactic Hegemony. Your species has been observed and evaluated. You will submit to incorporation into our collective, where you will serve according to your limited capabilities." Chun felt her jaw clench. She had spent 20 years in the military, working her way up from a fresh academy graduate to commander of Earth's most advanced warship. She had never backed down from a fight, whether it was against pirates in the outer system or the political machinations of Earth's various power blocks. "This is Commander Sarah Chun of the United Earth Space Command," she replied, keeping her voice level. "Earth is a sovereign world, and humanity will not submit to any foreign power. I suggest you reconsider your approach." The geometric patterns on Vexhai's face shifted in what the computer interpreted as amusement. "How quaint. Your confidence is noted, though entirely misplaced. We have observed your species for several of your rotations around your star. You are barely capable of traveling between the worlds of your own system, and your technology is laughably primitive. Your weapon systems appear to rely on crude projectile acceleration and fusion reactions." "We have fusion," another voice chimed in from off-screen, followed by what sounded suspiciously like alien laughter. "How delightfully archaic. Do they still use chemical propulsion as well?" "Indeed they do," Vexhai confirmed. "Nevertheless, they show some promise as laborers. Their physical form is reasonably sturdy, and they seem capable of following simple instructions. With proper guidance and control implants, they could be useful in mining operations or basic manufacturing." Chun felt the anger building in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. Around her, she could see her bridge crew exchanging glances. These weren't the noble, wise aliens of Earth's fiction. These were conquerors who saw humanity as nothing more than potential slaves. "You're making a mistake," Chin said quietly. "Humanity is not as helpless as you believe. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and every other catastrophe our world could throw at us. We've learned to work together when it matters, and we don't give up easily." Yes, Vexhai waved one of its 4 hands dismissively. "We've heard such claims from other species. They all say the same things. We are strong. We will fight. You underestimate us. It becomes quite tedious after a while. The reality is that you have no choice in this matter. Your integration into the hegemony is not a request. It is an inevitability." The view screen shifted to show a tactical display of the alien fleet. Chun could see that they had completely surrounded Earth, with smaller ships already moving toward the planet's surface. Her heart sank as she realized that her own fleet, impressive by human standards, was utterly outmatched. The aliens had appeared out of nowhere, their ships emerging from what looked like tears in space itself. "Your fleet will stand down immediately," Vexhai continued. "Any resistance will be met with precise force. We prefer to keep our new acquisitions intact, but we are prepared to reduce your numbers if necessary. Perhaps a demonstration would be appropriate." Shin watched in horror as one of the alien ships turned toward Luna City, humanity's largest settlement beyond Earth. The ship's hull began to glow with an ominous light, and she could see energy building at what was clearly a weapon system. Wait, she called out. There are civilians there. Families, children, an excellent point. Vexhai replied with what passed for a smile among its species. You would not want harm to come to your offspring, would you? Then, perhaps you will see reason. Order your forces to surrender, and we will ensure their transition to useful service is as painless as possible. Chen looked around her bridge. Lieutenant Rodriguez was pale, but alert, his hands hovering over the weapon's controls. Chief Engineer Martinez was running diagnostics on their defensive systems, though they all knew it would be like trying to stop a tsunami with a beach umbrella. Navigator Thompson was tracking the alien ship's positions, while Dr. Reeves monitored communications from the rest of the human fleet. Commander, Rodriguez whispered, Admiral Morrison is requesting orders. The entire fleet is waiting for your signal. Chen knew she was trapped. The aliens were right. Humanity was outmatched by every possible metric. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, their technology centuries or even millennia ahead of anything Earth could field. A conventional battle would be a massacre, and billions of innocent people would pay the price. But something in Vexhai's tone, that casual dismissal of human capability, made her pause. She thought about humanity's history, about all the times her species have been written off as weak, primitive, or doomed. Time and again, humans had found a way to survive and even thrive in impossible circumstances. You know what? Chun said, her voice growing stronger. You're right about one thing. We are primitive compared to you. Our ships are slower, our weapons weaker, our technology simpler. But there's one thing you haven't considered. And what would that be? Vexhai asked with obvious amusement. We're really good at learning, Chun replied. And we're even better at adapting. You want to integrate us into your hegemony? Fine. But you're going to find that humans don't integrate the way you expect. She looked directly at the alien commander, her eyes hard with determination. We can handle it. Vexhai's geometric face patterns shifted again, and this time the computer interpreted it as confusion rather than amusement. Handle what, exactly? Whatever you throw at us, Chin said simply. It's what we do. It's what we've always done. You think we're just going to lie down and accept slavery? You don't know humans very well. Your defiance is noted, Vexhai said, its tone growing colder. It will be corrected in time. All species go through this phase. Some require more adjustment than others. Maybe, Chin admitted. But here's the thing. You're going to have to catch us first. Before Vexhai could respond, Chin made a gesture to Rodriguez, who immediately activated a pre-planned sequence. Across the human fleet, every ship simultaneously activated their emergency protocols. Fusion cores overloaded in carefully controlled bursts, creating massive electromagnetic pulses that disrupted sensors and communications. Emergency beacons broadcast on every frequency, sending coded messages to hidden human outposts throughout the solar system and beyond. Most importantly, every human ship engaged their experimental quantum tunneling drives simultaneously. The technology was new, unreliable, and dangerous. Half the ships that used it might not survive the jump. But it would scatter the human fleet across the galaxy in random directions, making it impossible for the aliens to track or capture them all. What are you doing? Vexhai demanded as the first human ships began to vanish in brilliant flashes of light. Something you didn't expect, Chin replied as her own ship's drive began to charge. Humans don't fight fair. We survive. And when we come back, we'll be ready for you. The last thing she saw before the Defiance vanished into the quantum foam was Vexhai's face patterns shifting rapidly between confusion, anger, and what might have been the first hint of concern. The jump lasted only seconds from the crew's perspective, but when they emerged, they found themselves in an unfamiliar star system. The ship's systems were badly damaged from the experimental drive, but they were alive and, more importantly, free. Status report. Chin called out as her crew worked to restore their systems. Drive core is offline, Martinez reported. We've got hull breaches on decks 7 through 9, and life support is running on backup power. But we're intact, ma'am. Any sign of pursuit? Negative, Thompson replied from the navigation station. I'm not even sure where we are. The star patterns don't match anything in our database. Chin nodded grimly. They were alone in an unknown part of the galaxy, on a damaged ship with limited supplies. By any reasonable measure, their situation was hopeless. But she found herself smiling anyway. Rodriguez, can you raise any of the other ships? Try now, ma'am. I'm picking up scattered transmissions on the emergency frequencies. Looks like at least 40% of the fleet made it out. That's better than I hoped, Chen said. Open a channel to all surviving vessels. The main screen flickered to life, showing a split view of several human captains. Some looked shaken, others determined, but all of them were clearly waiting for her to say something that would make sense of their desperate situation. Ladies and gentlemen, Chen began, we've just bought ourselves some time. The aliens think they know what they're dealing with, but they're about to learn that humans are full of surprises. We're scattered across the galaxy, which means we can't be easily hunted down. More importantly, it means we can learn. We can adapt. We can prepare. She paused, looking at each of her fellow commanders in turn. They called us primitive. Maybe we are, but primitive doesn't mean helpless, and it certainly doesn't mean defeated. We've got human colonies and research stations hidden throughout this galaxy. We've got resources they don't know about, and allies they've never met. Most importantly, we've got something they clearly lack. What's that, Commander? Asked Captain Morrison of the badly damaged cruiser Indomitable. Imagination, Chen replied. They've been doing things the same way for so long that they can't conceive of any other approach. They think in terms of superior firepower and technological advantage. We think in terms of survival and adaptation. She stood up straighter, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to split up and make contact with every human outpost we can find. We're going to study their technology, learn from other species they've conquered, and find their weaknesses. We're going to prepare for the day when we go back to Earth. And then, ask Commander Park from the science vessel Galileo. Chen's smile was sharp and predatory. Then, we're going to show the hegemony exactly what we can handle it really means. As the transmission ended and the scattered human ships began to plot their courses to hidden colonies and research stations, none of them noticed the small, sleek vessel that had been observing their conversation from a distance. The ship belonged to the Kythera, one of the few species that had successfully resisted hegemony expansion, and its captain had been very interested to observe humanity's unexpected response to what seemed like certain defeat. Captain Zaraketh made a note in her ship's log. The humans had shown promise, not in their technology or their firepower, but in their refusal to accept defeat and their willingness to think outside established parameters. Perhaps it was time for the Kythera to make contact with this upstart species. After all, the enemy of one's enemy was often a useful ally. But that would come later. For now, she watched as the human ships disappeared one by one into the vastness of space, carrying with them the seeds of what might become the hegemony's greatest challenge. The aliens had dismissed human confidence as naive bravado, but Zaraketh suspected they were about to learn a very painful lesson about the difference between confidence and determination. Somewhere in the quantum foam between star systems, the future was beginning to take shape. 6 months after the failed invasion of Earth, Commander Saracen stood on the observation deck of Haven Station, watching the controlled chaos of the largest human construction project in history. What had once been a small research outpost hidden in the Kepler 442 system had transformed into a sprawling military-industrial complex that stretched across 3 asteroid fields and 2 moons. The station hummed with activity as thousands of humans worked alongside their new alien allies. The Kythera had made first contact 3 months ago, and their advanced manufacturing techniques were helping humanity build ships and weapons at a pace that would have been impossible before the invasion. But, more importantly, they were sharing something even more valuable, intelligence about the hegemony's weaknesses. Commander Chun to the war room. Came the announcement over the station's communication system. Chen took one last look at the shipyards where the first of humanity's new hybrid warships were taking shape, then made her way through the station's corridors. The war room was a study in organized chaos. Holographic displays showed star maps, fleet positions, and intelligence reports from across the galaxy. At the center of it all sat Admiral Rebecca Morrison, who had been elected as the supreme commander of the human resistance by the surviving fleet captains. She was flanked by Dr. Elena Vasquez, humanity's leading xenobiologist, and Captain Zaraketh of the Kythera. Sarah, Morrison said as Chen entered. Good, you're here. We've received some interesting intelligence from our deep cover operations. Chen took her seat at the briefing table, noting the grim expressions on everyone's faces. What kind of intelligence? Dr. Vasquez activated a holographic display showing what appeared to be a massive space station. This is Hegemony's Central Command, located in the Andoric system. It's where the Hegemony's High Council makes all strategic decisions. Our agents have discovered that they're planning something called final integration, which is, Shin asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. Complete genocide, Captain Zaraketh replied in her melodic but serious tone. The Hegemony has decided that humanity is too troublesome to integrate. They're planning to sterilize Earth and hunt down every human settlement in the galaxy. Chun felt her blood run cold. How long do we have? 6 months, Morrison replied. Maybe less. They're already mobilizing fleets from across their territory. When they move, they'll come with everything they have. That's not all, Dr. Vasquez continued. We've also learned something else about the Hegemony. Something that changes everything we thought we knew about them. She manipulated the display to show a complex biological diagram. The Hegemony isn't really an alliance of different species working together. It's a parasitic organism that takes over entire civilizations by implanting control parasites in their leadership. Every species in the Hegemony has been enslaved, not recruited. Chen studied the diagram with growing horror. You're saying that Supreme Coordinator HFY is essentially a puppet, Zaraketh confirmed. The real Hegemony is a single organism that spans multiple galaxies. What we faced at Earth was just one small tendril of something much larger. But there's good news too, Morrison said, pulling up another display. Thanks to our alliance with the Kithira and intelligence from other resistance movements, we've learned that the parasite has a critical weakness. It requires a specific quantum frequency to maintain control over its hosts. Disrupt that frequency, and the enslaved species regain their free will. Chun felt a spark of hope. And we can generate that disruption. We can do better than that, Dr. Vasquez said with a predatory smile. We can create a resonance cascade that will spread the disruption throughout their entire command structure. But there's a catch. There's always a catch, Chun muttered. We need to get close to their central command station to deploy the weapon, Morrison explained. Close enough that they'll detect us long before we're in range. They'll throw everything they have at us to stop it. Chun looked around the table. So we're talking about a suicide mission. Not necessarily, Zaraketh said. My people have been fighting the Hegemony for centuries. We've learned that they have certain blind spots in their thinking. They always assume that their enemies will use conventional tactics, direct assault, overwhelming force, technological superiority. But humans don't think conventionally, Chun said, beginning to understand. Exactly, which is why we believe you might succeed where others have failed. But it will require every human ship we can muster, and most of them won't survive the mission. Chun was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the thousands of humans who had died in the initial invasion, the billions still trapped on Earth under Hegemony occupation, and the scattered survivors who were looking to their leadership for a miracle. What did you have in mind? She asked finally. Morrison activated a new display showing the Andoric system. We call it Operation Prometheus. We're going to steal fire from the gods and give it to every enslaved species in the galaxy. The plan, as Morrison outlined it, was audacious even by human standards. 3 separate fleets would attack Hegemony positions simultaneously, forcing them to divide their attention. The first fleet would assault a major shipyard in the Vextai system, making it appear that humanity was trying to capture advanced technology. The second would attack supply lines in the Korth sector, suggesting a campaign of attrition. Meanwhile, the third and smallest fleet would use a previously unknown hyperspace route to approach Andorics from an unexpected direction. Their ships would be disguised as disabled Hegemony vessels, using technology stolen from their first encounters with the aliens. If they could get close enough to the command station, they could deploy the quantum disruption device and free every enslaved species in Hegemony space. It's insane, Chin said after hearing the full plan. Completely, Morrison agreed, which is why it might work. The Hegemony has never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for a single decisive strike. They're used to species that fight to preserve themselves, not to liberate others. Speaking of others, Dr. Vasquez interjected, we've been in contact with resistance movements among several enslaved species. The Zarak Empire, the Collective of Minds, the Stellar Assembly. They're all ready to rise up if we can break the Hegemony's control. Chun felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. You want me to lead the assault fleet? You're the one who told Vexhai the humans could handle it, Morrison said with a slight smile. Time to prove it. Over the next 3 months, Haven Station became the center of the largest military buildup in human history. Ships arrived from hidden colonies throughout the galaxy, bringing with them crews eager to strike back at their oppressors. The Kythera shared their most advanced technologies, while human engineers worked around the clock to integrate alien systems with human ingenuity. The result was a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships bristled with exotic weapons and defensive systems, while new hybrid designs combined the best of multiple technologies. More importantly, every ship was crewed by humans who had seen their homeworld invaded and their people enslaved. They fought not just for victory, but for freedom itself. Shin found herself in command of the assault fleet, with the rebuilt Defiance as her flagship. The ship bore little resemblance to the vessel she had commanded at Earth. Kythera's shield protected Zorak weapon systems, while human engines pushed the ship faster than anything in its size class. The bridge had been redesigned to accommodate officers from 3 different species, all working together toward a common goal. Final systems check, Chen announced as the assault fleet prepared to depart. Around her, the bridge crew ran through their pre-mission protocols with practiced efficiency. Lieutenant Rodriguez, now promoted to commander, handled the weapons systems. Chief Engineer Martinez monitored the hybrid power core that made their impossible speed possible. Dr. Reeves coordinated with their alien allies through a quantum communication array that allowed near-instantaneous contact across the galaxy. All ships report ready, Commander Rodriguez announced. Kythera support vessels are in position, reported Tactical Officer Shintai, a young Kythera who had volunteered to serve aboard a human ship. Zorak engineering teams have confirmed weapon calibrations, added Chief Martinez. Chen looked at the tactical display, showing her fleet of 50 ships, all that remained of humanity's original space force, plus volunteers from a dozen different resistance movements. They were going up against a command station protected by thousands of hegemony vessels, with backup fleets positioned throughout the system. By any rational calculation, they were doomed. You know, Chan said to her crew, 6 months ago, we were running for our lives from an enemy that considered us barely worth their attention. Now we're about to attempt the most audacious military operation in galactic history. Think they'll still consider us primitive? Rodriguez asked with a grin. Only one way to find out, Chen replied. All ships prepare for hyperspace transition. Let's go remind the hegemony what we can handle it really means. The fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind the safety of Haven Station for what would likely be a one-way journey to the heart of enemy territory. But as they traveled through the quantum foam between dimensions, Chan felt a calm certainty settle over her. Humanity had faced extinction before and survived. They had been conquered before and freed themselves. They had been dismissed as primitive and proven their worth. Now, they were going to do something no enslaved species had ever attempted. They were going to free not just themselves, but everyone who had ever fallen under the hegemony's control. It was impossible, irrational, and completely insane. It was also the most human thing anyone could imagine. Behind them, the diversionary fleets began their attacks on schedule, drawing hegemony attention away from Andorix. The first phase of Operation Prometheus had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the depths of hyperspace, 50 ships full of humans, Kythera, Zorak, and members of a dozen other species prepared for the battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. They carried with them humanity's greatest weapon, not advanced technology or superior firepower, but the unshakable belief that freedom was worth any sacrifice. The hegemony was about to learn that they had made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. Humans weren't just good at surviving impossible odds. They were even better at making sure everyone else survived too. The Andorix system blazed with the fury of 1,000 suns as the human assault fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly into the heart of Hegemony's Central Command. What they found waiting for them defied their worst expectations. The command station was not merely a facility, but an entire artificial world, its surface bristling with defensive installations and surrounded by a fleet that numbered in the tens of thousands. Contacts everywhere, reported Commander Rodriguez from the tactical station aboard the Defiance. I'm reading at least 15,000 vessels, ranging from corvettes to dreadnoughts the size of small moons. Ma'am, they were ready for us. Commander Chin studied the tactical display with grim determination. The Hegemony fleet was arranged in perfect formation around the command world, their crystalline ships gleaming like deadly jewels against the starfield. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly overwhelming. They knew we were coming, she said quietly. The question is, did they know why? Before anyone could answer, the communications array crackled to life. Supreme Coordinator Vex-High's geometric face appeared on the main screen, and this time there was no mistaking the malevolent satisfaction in its shifting patterns. The persistent little mammal's return, Vex-High said, its translated voice dripping with contempt. Did you truly believe your crude deception would fool us? We have monitored your pathetic resistance efforts since the moment you fled our righteous embrace. Chun kept her expression neutral, though her heart was sinking. If the hegemony knew about their plan, then Operation Prometheus was doomed before it began. Worse, it meant that thousands of humans and their alien allies were about to die for nothing. Your confidence is noted, Chin replied, throwing Vex-High's own words back at it. Though, I notice you brought quite a lot of ships to deal with our pathetic resistance. Indeed, Vex-High acknowledged. Perhaps we underestimated your capacity for self-destruction. No matter. Your sacrifice will serve as an excellent demonstration to other species who might harbor thoughts of rebellion. Behold the futility of resistance. The view screen shifted to show feeds from Earth's surface. Chin's blood ran cold as she saw human cities burning, populations being herded into massive containment facilities, and the blue skies of her homeworld obscured by the smoke of systematic destruction. We began the final integration immediately after detecting your fleet movements. Vex-High continued with obvious pleasure. Your species will be extinct within the solar day, and your homeworld will be prepared for more suitable inhabitants. This is the fate of all who dare to challenge the natural order. Around the bridge, Chun could see her crew's faces reflecting the horror and rage she felt building in her own chest. Earth was dying, and they were too far away to do anything about it. Their desperate gamble had failed, and now humanity would pay the ultimate price for their defiance. However, Vex-High continued, we are not without mercy. Surrender now, and we will ensure that your deaths are swift and painless. Continue this futile resistance, and we will make your suffering legendary throughout the galaxy. Chen looked around her bridge, seeing the faces of people she had served with for years. Rodriguez, who had followed her through every impossible situation. Martinez, whose engineering genius had kept them alive against all odds. Dr. Reeves, whose quiet brilliance had helped them understand their enemies. Shintai, the young Kithira officer who had volunteered to die alongside humans she barely knew. They were all looking to her for leadership, for some miracle that would turn certain defeat into victory. But for the first time in her career, Chun had no idea what to do. They were outnumbered 300 to 1, facing an enemy with technology centuries ahead of their own, while their homeworld burned in the distance. Commander, Rodriguez said quietly, we're receiving coded transmissions from the diversionary fleets. They're not going well. Admiral Patterson's fleet has been completely destroyed, and Captain Kim's force is being hunted down across 3 star systems. Chin closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of failure pressing down on her. She had promised her people that they could handle anything the galaxy threw at them. She had convinced them to risk everything on a desperate gamble to free not just humanity, but every enslaved species in hegemony space. Instead, she had led them all to destruction. Ma'am, Dr. Reeves spoke up from the science station. I'm detecting some unusual quantum fluctuations from the command world. The readings don't match anything in our database of hegemony technology. Chen opened her eyes, grasping at any straw of hope. What kind of fluctuations? It's hard to tell from this distance, but it looks like some kind of massive quantum processing array. The energy signatures are unprecedented. Whatever they're doing in there, it's requiring enormous amounts of power. Chen's mind began to race. The hegemony had always relied on their technological superiority to maintain control over their enslaved species. But what if that control required more than just the parasites Dr. Vasquez had identified? What if it required constant reinforcement from a central source? Shen Tai, she called to the Kithira officer. Your people have been fighting the hegemony longer than anyone. Have you ever detected anything like these quantum signatures? The young alien's crystalline features shifted through several colors before settling on a deep blue that Shun had learned indicated intense concentration. Not exactly, Commander. But there are legends among my people, stories passed down for the early days of the war. They speak of a great machine that enslaves minds across the galaxy, a nexus of control that reaches into every conquered world. A central control system, Chun breathed. That's what this place really is. Not just a command center. It's the source of their power over every enslaved species. Ma'am, Rodriguez interrupted urgently. The hegemony fleet is moving. They're forming up for a final assault. We have maybe 10 minutes before they're in optimal firing range. Chen looked at the tactical display, her mind working furiously. The quantum disruption device they had brought was designed to break the hegemony's control over their enslaved populations. But what if they could do more than that? What if they could target the source itself? Dr. Reeves, she called out, could our quantum disruption device affect whatever's generating those energy signatures? The science officer's eyes widened as she understood the implication. It's possible, but we'd have to get much closer. The device was designed to work at close range against individual command ships. To affect something that size, we need to be practically touching the planet's surface. Which is suicide, Rodriguez added grimly. Their defensive grid would vaporize us long before we got within effective range. Chen stared at the image of the massive command world, her mind racing through possibilities. Then, slowly, a smile began to spread across her face. It was a terrible smile, the kind that appeared when someone realized they had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Rodriguez, patch me through to all ships in the fleet, she ordered. Channel open, ma'am. Chen took a deep breath, looking one last time at the faces of her crew. All ships, this is Commander Chun. I won't lie to you. Our situation is hopeless. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and outclassed in every possible way. Earth is dying, our allies are being hunted down, and in a few minutes we're all going to be dead. She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. But before we die, we have a chance to do something that no enslaved species has ever done. We have a chance to break the chains that bind not just humanity, but every intelligent race in this galaxy. The hegemony thinks they know us. They think they understand what we're capable of. They're about to learn that they were wrong. On screens throughout the fleet, she could see the faces of human, Kithira, Zarak, and dozens of other species, all united in their desperate determination to strike back at their oppressors. The command world isn't just their headquarters, Chen continued. It's the source of their control over every conquered species. Destroy it, and we free the galaxy. But it means we have to get close enough to their planet to deploy our quantum disruption device, and that means flying through the most heavily defended airspace in known space. She stood up, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders one final time. I won't order anyone to follow me on this mission. What I'm proposing is suicide by any reasonable definition. But if we succeed, if we can detonate our device at the heart of their control system, then every enslaved species in the galaxy will regain their free will. Billions of beings will be free to choose their own destiny. The responses came immediately from across the fleet. Captain Morrison from the Indomitable. Defiance, this is Morrison. My ship is ready to follow you into hell itself. Captain Singh from the Relentless. Sarah, we've come too far to turn back now. Let's finish this. One by one, every ship in the fleet acknowledged their willingness to follow her into what would certainly be the last battle of their lives. Chun felt a surge of pride that almost overwhelmed her grief for their doomed mission. All right then, she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. All ships, prepare for final assault. Target the command world's primary quantum facility. We're going to show the hegemony what humans do when they have nothing left to lose. As the human fleet began its desperate charge toward the massive command world, Vexhai watched from the safety of the central control chamber with something approaching admiration. The primitive mammals were about to be annihilated, but they were facing their destruction with a courage that the hegemony rarely encountered. Fascinating, Vexhai murmured to its subordinates. They actually believe they can succeed. Such delusion is almost worthy of respect. Shall we destroy them quickly? Asked another coordinator. No, Vexhai plaith sotfelli. Let them come closer. I want to observe this phenomenon more carefully. Perhaps there is something to be learned from their irrational behavior before we exterminate their entire species. It was a decision that the hegemony would come to regret. As the human fleet dove into the teeth of the most concentrated defensive fire in galactic history, something unexpected began to happen. The quantum disruption device, designed to break mental control at short range, began to resonate with the massive quantum processing arrays that maintained the hegemony's grip on their enslaved populations. The resonance was subtle at first, barely detectable even to the hegemony's sophisticated sensors. But as the human ships fought their way closer to the command world's surface, the resonance grew stronger, and the first cracks began to appear in a system of control that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. The real battle was just beginning. The space around Orcs burned with the fury of dying stars, as the human fleet carved a path of destruction through the hegemony's defensive lines. Ships exploded in brilliant cascades of light as plasma beams and quantum torpedoes found their marks. But for every hegemony vessel destroyed, 3 more human ships were reduced to expanding clouds of superheated metal and debris. Commander Chen gripped the arms of her command chair as the Defiance shuddered under another barrage from the massive defensive platforms orbiting the command world. Her beautiful ship, rebuilt with the best technology from a dozen species, was being systematically torn apart by weapons that turned matter into pure energy. Hull breach on decks 12 through 15. Chief Martinez reported from his engineering station, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Emergency force fields are holding, but we've lost main power to the port weapons array. 23 ships down, Commander Rodriguez added from tactical, his face grim as he watched friendly contacts disappear from his displays. We're losing them faster than we can replace them. Chen watched the tactical display with growing desperation. They had fought their way through 2 complete defensive rings around the command world, but at a terrible cost. More than half their fleet was gone, and they were still thousands of kilometers from their target. At this rate, they would all be dead long before they could deploy the quantum disruption device. But then, something unexpected happened. Commander, Dr. Reeves called out from the science station, her voice filled with sudden excitement. I'm detecting anomalies in the hegemony fleet formation. Some of their ships appear to be hesitating. Chen looked up from the tactical display, hope flickering in her chest. What kind of hesitating? Their firing patterns are becoming erratic. Some vessels are slowing their rate of fire. Others are actually pulling back from optimal firing positions. It's as if they're confused. On the main view screen, Chen could see what Dr. Reeves was describing. Several hegemony cruisers that had been maintaining perfect formation were now drifting slightly out of position, their weapon fire becoming sporadic and less accurate. The quantum resonance, Chen breathed, understanding flooding through her. Our disruption device is already beginning to work. The closer we get to their central control system, the weaker their hold becomes on their enslaved crews. Ma'am, Shintai spoke up from her station, her crystalline features glowing with something that might have been hope. If that's true, then many of the ships we're fighting aren't really our enemies. They're slaves, just like the rest of us. Chun felt her heart racing as the implications sank in. If the hegemony's control was beginning to weaken, then every ship they destroyed might be taking the lives of people who were fighting against their will. But more importantly, it meant that their desperate mission might actually succeed. All ships, she broadcasted to the remaining fleet. Be advised that some hegemony vessels may be experiencing control disruption. Watch for ships breaking formation or reducing fire rates. They may be attempting to break free. As if in response to her words, one of the massive hegemony dreadnoughts suddenly stopped firing altogether. The ship, easily 10 times the size of the largest human vessel, began to drift away from the defensive formation. On its hull, Chen could see weapon ports closing and defensive shields powering down. This is impossible, came Vexai's voice over the communication channel, and for the first time, the alien coordinator sounded genuinely disturbed. The control matrix is operating within normal parameters. There should be no deviation in behavioral patterns. Chen smiled grimly as she responded. Maybe your normal parameters don't account for the quantum resonance effect of our disruption device. Or maybe your enslaved crews are just remembering what it feels like to think for themselves. The control system has operated flawlessly for millennia. A few primitive mammals with crude technology cannot possibly. The alien's words were cut off as another massive hegemony vessel, this one a battle cruiser the size of a small asteroid, suddenly turned its weapons on its own fleet. Brilliant beams of energy lanced out from the ship, striking 3 nearby vessels and causing them to explode in spectacular fireballs. What are you doing? Vexai's voice rose to a shriek. You will cease this behavior immediately and resume your assigned tasks. But the freed ship didn't respond to Vexhi's commands. Instead, it opened a communication channel to the human fleet. The face that appeared on the screen was unlike anything Chun had ever seen. A being of living crystal with features that shifted through the colors of the rainbow. When it spoke, its voice was like the sound of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Human vessels, the being said. This is Captain Korthek of the Stellar Assembly Vessel Shattered Chains. We have broken free of hegemony control and offer our assistance in your mission. The quantum resonance from your device is spreading throughout the fleet. More ships are regaining their autonomy every moment. Chun felt tears of relief streaming down her face. Captain Korthek, this is Commander Chun. Your assistance is more than welcome. Can you help us reach the command world's surface? It will be our honor, Korthek replied. We know the location of the primary quantum processing facility. Follow our lead, and we will clear a path through the remaining loyal forces. What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history, as the human fleet and their newly freed allies fought their way deeper into the command world's defensive grid. More hegemony ships began to break free of their master's control. The careful formations that had seemed so overwhelming began to dissolve into chaos as enslaved crews remembered their origins and turned their weapons on their former captors. I'm reading massive power fluctuations from the command world's surface, Dr. Reeves reported. The quantum processing facility is experiencing cascade failures. Whatever they're doing down there, it's not working the way they expected. Chun could see the truth of that statement on her tactical displays. The neat, orderly patterns of hegemony fleet movement were breaking down into something that looked more like a civil war. Ships that had served the hegemony for centuries were suddenly fighting for their freedom, and the enslaving power that had dominated the galaxy was beginning to crumble. All ships, Chun announced to her mixed fleet of humans and freed aliens, final approach to target. This is what we came here to do. Let's finish it. The Defiance, battered and bleeding atmosphere from dozens of hull breaches, led the charge toward the command world surface. Around it, the surviving human vessels and their new allies formed a protective formation, fighting off the dwindling number of ships still under hegemony control. As they broke through the planet's atmosphere, Chen got her first close look at the true nature of the hegemony's seat of power. The command world wasn't a natural planet at all, but a massive artificial construct built around a stellar core. Its surface was covered with geometric structures that pulsed with ominous light, and at the center of it all was a pyramid the size of a mountain range. There, Captain Korthek's voice came over the communication channel. The central processing nexus. That is the source of the hegemony's power. Destroy it, and every enslaved mind in the galaxy will be free. Chen looked at the massive structure and felt the weight of impossible responsibility settle on her shoulders. Billions of lives depended on what they did in the next few minutes. If they succeeded, the galaxy would be free. If they failed, the hegemony would tighten their control and ensure that no species would ever have another chance at liberation. Dr. Reeves, she called out, how close do we need to be for the quantum disruption device to be effective? At least within a few hundred meters of the structure's base, the science officer replied. The quantum field generators are heavily shielded. We'll need to penetrate their defenses to reach the core systems. Chen looked at her tactical display and felt her heart sink. The pyramid was surrounded by layers of defensive systems that made the orbital platforms look like children's toys. Energy barriers, automated weapon systems, and swarms of defensive drones formed an almost impenetrable barrier around the structure. Ma'am, Commander Rodriguez said quietly, our remaining ships won't survive a direct assault on those defenses. We need another approach. Chen was about to respond when Captain Korthek's voice interrupted her thoughts. Commander Chun, my people have been studying hegemony architecture for centuries. The pyramid you see is not solid. It's actually a massive quantum resonance chamber, hollow at its center. If we could find a way inside, we could detonate our device at the heart of their control system. Chun finished, understanding immediately. But how do we get inside? There are maintenance access points at the base. Another voice joined the conversation. This one belonged to Captain Zuranin of the Collective of Minds, whose ship had broken free during the battle. My people helped construct similar facilities before our enslavement. I know their design weaknesses. Chun felt a surge of hope. What do you need from us? Cover, Zuranin replied simply. My ship has the shielding necessary to penetrate their outer defenses, but I'll need your fleet to keep their attention focused elsewhere. Once I'm inside, I can create an opening for your ship to follow. You're talking about a suicide mission, Chen said. No, Zaranine corrected, and Chun could hear the smile in the alien captain's voice. I'm talking about the price of freedom. Some things are worth any sacrifice. Chun looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They had come so far, sacrificed so much, and now they were being asked to trust their mission to an alien captain they had known for less than an hour. But as she met each of their eyes, she saw the same determination that had carried them through every impossible situation. All ships, she announced, prepare for final assault. We're going to give Captain Zaranine the cover she needs to breach their defenses. When the opening appears, Defiance will follow her in to deploy the quantum disruption device. Commander, Rodriguez said quietly, even if we succeed in deploying the device, we'll be at the center of a collapsing quantum field. The energy release will destroy everything within several thousand kilometers. Chen nodded grimly. I know, but if we don't try, then every enslaved species in the galaxy remains in chains forever. Sometimes the price of freedom is everything you have to give. As the mixed fleet of human and freed alien vessels began their final attack on the pyramid's defenses, Chun felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. They had started this mission with the simple goal of freeing humanity from alien oppression. Now they were about to liberate the entire galaxy. Supreme Coordinator Vexhi's face appeared on the main screen one last time, its geometric features shifting rapidly through patterns that the computer interpreted as rage and desperation. You have no idea what you're doing, Vexhi snarled. The hegemony has maintained order in this galaxy for millions of years. Without our guidance, the lesser species will destroy themselves in chaotic warfare. You are not bringing freedom. You are bringing destruction. Chen looked directly at the alien coordinator, her voice steady and calm. You know what? You're probably right. The galaxy is going to be a messy, chaotic place without your control, but it will be free. And sometimes freedom is worth a little chaos. She turned to her crew one final time. All hands, prepare for final approach. Let's show the galaxy what we can handle it really means. The battle for the heart of the hegemony was about to reach its climax. The final moments of the hegemony began with the sound of crystalline hull plates shattering against quantum barriers. Captain Zarnine's ship, the voice of memory, slammed into the pyramid's defensive grid with the force of a falling star, its specialized shielding designed by the collective of minds holding just long enough to punch through the outer energy barriers. Commander Chen watched from the bridge of the Defiance as the alien vessel disappeared into a cascade of brilliant explosions, its sacrifice creating a momentary gap in the defenses that had protected the hegemony's seat of power for millennia. She did it, Dr. Reeves whispered from the science station, her voice filled with awe. The barrier is down. We have maybe 30 seconds before their automated systems compensate. All power to engines, Chen commanded. Rodriguez, prepare the quantum disruption device for immediate deployment. Martinez, give me everything the power core can handle. The Defiance screamed through the breach in the pyramid's defenses, its hull glowing white-hot from the energy discharge of the collapsing barriers. Around them, the geometric structures of the command world's surface rushed past in a blur of alien architecture and pulsing light. As they penetrated deeper into the pyramid's hollow interior, Chen got her first glimpse of the true horror of hegemony control. The inner surface of the massive structure was covered with billions of neural interface pods, each one containing a member of an enslaved species. Their minds were linked together in a vast network that processed the quantum commands needed to maintain control over every hegemony world. My God, Commander Rodriguez breathed, staring at the endless rows of enslaved beings. They're using them as living computers. Not for much longer, Chen replied grimly. At the center of the pyramid, a massive quantum processing core pulsed with malevolent light. Streams of energy flowed between the core and the neural pods, carrying the commands that kept billions of beings in mental chains. Target acquired, Dr. Reeves announced. Quantum disruption device is ready for deployment. But, Commander, the energy release from the core's destruction will propagate throughout the entire pyramid. Anyone still inside when it goes critical will die, Chen finished. I know. Can you configure the device for delayed detonation? Maybe 60 seconds, Dr. Reeves replied. But that's not enough time to escape the blast radius. Chun looked around her bridge one final time, seeing the faces of the people who had followed her on this impossible journey. They had known from the beginning that this was a one-way mission, but knowing it intellectually and facing the reality were two different things. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Parker called out from the communication station, "I'm receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. The disruption effect is already spreading through the quantum network. Enslaved populations on hundreds of worlds are regaining their free will." Chun felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to the reports. On the industrial world of Vexti Prime, Zarak workers were rising up against their overseers. In the research facilities of the Korath Nebula, Kithira scientists were destroying the weapons they had been forced to create. Across the galaxy, the chains of mental slavery were beginning to break. "Rodriguez, deploy the device," Chin ordered. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said quietly. "Are you sure about this? Maybe we could find another way. Give ourselves more time to escape." Chin shook her head. "Every second we delay means more suffering for the beings still trapped in those pods. We came here to free the galaxy. Let's finish the job." Rodriguez's hands moved over his controls with practiced precision. Quantum disruption device deployed. Timer set for 60 seconds and counting. The device, no larger than a briefcase, drifted toward the massive processing core at the pyramid center. As it approached, the very air around it began to shimmer with quantum distortions. The enslaved beings in their neural pods began to stir as the disruption field interfered with their control implants. 50 seconds, Dr. Reeves announced. "Chun," came Supreme Coordinator Vexhi's voice over the communication system, and this time the alien sounded genuinely desperate. "You don't understand what you're doing. The control network isn't just about maintaining order. It's what keeps this galaxy from tearing itself apart. Without the hegemony's guidance, there will be war, chaos, suffering on an unimaginable scale." Shin activated the comm system one final time. "You know what, Vexhi? You're probably right. The galaxy is going to be a mess without your control. But here's the thing about freedom. It's not about making the easy choice. It's about giving people the right to make their own choices, even if they're bad ones." 40 seconds, Dr. Reeves called out. Around them, the pyramid's interior was coming alive as more and more of the enslaved beings began to break free of their mental chains. Neural pods were opening, releasing beings who hadn't seen daylight in decades, or even centuries. The sight was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. "Ma'am," Martinez reported from his engineering station, "I'm detecting massive quantum fluctuations throughout the structure. The control network is beginning to collapse. We're seeing cascading failures across multiple star systems." 30 seconds. Chun closed her eyes and thought about Earth, about the blue skies and green forests of her homeworld. She thought about the billions of humans who were counting on her to succeed and the billions more beings throughout the galaxy who would soon taste freedom for the first time in their lives. 20 seconds. Commander, Shun Tai spoke up from her station, her crystalline features glowing with a soft blue light. "It has been an honor serving with humans. My people will remember this sacrifice for 1,000 generations." "The honor was ours," Chin replied. "Every species deserves the chance to determine their own destiny." 10 seconds. Chun stood up from her command chair and looked around the bridge one last time. These people had followed her into the heart of impossible danger, had trusted her with their lives and the fate of the galaxy. She couldn't have asked for better companions on this final journey. 5 seconds. "All hands," Chun announced over the ship's communication system. "It's been a privilege serving with each and every one of you. Remember, we can handle anything." 3, 2, 1. The quantum disruption device detonated with a flash of light that could be seen across half the galaxy. The massive processing core at the pyramid's center simply ceased to exist, its matter converted to pure energy in an instant. The quantum wave that followed raced outward at faster-than-light speed, carried along the network that had once enslaved billions of minds. On every hegemony world, in every slave camp and research facility, beings who had been controlled for generations suddenly found themselves able to think their own thoughts again. The effect wasn't gradual. It was instantaneous and complete. Eons of mental slavery ended in a single moment as the quantum chains that had bound the galaxy together finally snapped. Supreme Coordinator Vexhi watched in horror from the safety of an escape pod as the pyramid that had been the source of hegemony power for millions of years collapsed in on itself. The being that had dismissed humans as primitive mammals was now seeing its entire civilization crumble because it had underestimated the determination of a species that refused to accept defeat. As reports flooded in from across the galaxy, Vexi began to understand the true scope of what had just happened. This wasn't just the destruction of a control facility. It was the end of the hegemony itself. Without the quantum network to maintain mental control over their subjects, the hegemony was just another species among many, stripped of the power that had made them masters of the galaxy. On Earth, the hegemony occupation forces suddenly found themselves facing a population that was no longer paralyzed by despair. Humans poured into the streets, throwing themselves against their oppressors with the fury of species that had been pushed beyond its breaking point. The alien superior technology meant nothing when faced with 8 billion angry humans who had nothing left to lose. Similar scenes played out on thousands of worlds as liberated populations turned against their former masters. The great slave empire that had seemed unshakable was dissolving in a matter of hours, undone by the sacrifice of a handful of humans who had refused to accept that primitive meant helpless. 3 months later, Admiral Rebecca Morrison stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Haven Station, watching as representatives from dozens of former hegemony species work together to establish a new galactic confederation. It was messy, chaotic, and sometimes frustrating, but it was free. A memorial wall dominated one section of the station, listing the names of the humans who had given their lives in Operation Prometheus. At the top of the list, in letters of pure light, were the names of Commander Sarah Chun and the crew of the UES Defiance. Below their names was a simple inscription. They said, "We can handle it." They were right. Captain Zaraketh of the Kithira approached the memorial, her species' traditional offering of crystal flowers in her hands. "Your people saved us all," she said to Morrison. "The galaxy will never forget their sacrifice." Morrison nodded, thinking about the last transmission they had received from Chun before the pyramid's destruction. She always said that humans were good at adapting, at finding ways to survive impossible situations. I don't think even she realized how right she was. "What will you do now?" Zaraketh asked. "The hegemony remnants are scattered and broken. Your species is free to return to Earth and rebuild." Morrison smiled, looking out at the bustling activity of the station. Earth is being rebuilt, and it will be beautiful again. But there's still work to do out here. The galaxy is free, but freedom comes with responsibilities. Someone needs to help all these liberated species learn to work together to make sure that what happened to us never happens again. She turned to face the Kithira captain directly. Besides, Sarah was right about something else. Humans are really good at learning. And we've learned that the best way to ensure our own freedom is to help protect everyone else's. As if to emphasize her point, a group of human engineers floated past the observation window, working alongside Zorak technicians and collective of minds bioengineers to install a new quantum communication array. The site would have been impossible just a year ago, but now it was becoming routine throughout the liberated galaxy. "You know," Morrison said thoughtfully, "the hegemony made one critical error in their assessment of humanity. They thought our confidence came from arrogance or ignorance. They never understood that it came from experience surviving things that should have been impossible." She looked at Chen's name on the memorial wall, glowing softly in the station's artificial twilight. When Sarah told them we could handle it, she wasn't boasting. She was stating a simple fact. Humans handle things. It's what we do. It's what we've always done. And now, thanks to her and everyone who followed her, the rest of the galaxy gets to learn how to handle things too. Far across the galaxy, on the rebuilt world of Earth, children played in parks beneath blue skies, their laughter carrying on winds that smelled of growing things rather than smoke and defeat. They were too young to remember the invasion, too innocent to understand the full scope of what had been sacrificed to ensure their freedom. But they would grow up in a galaxy where no species bowed to another, where every being had the right to chart their own course among the stars. And sometimes when the stars were bright and the night was still, those children would hear stories of a brave woman named Sarah Chun, who had looked at impossible odds and said 2 simple words that changed the destiny of the galaxy. "We can handle it." The hegemony had dismissed human confidence as naive bravado, but in the end, they learned that confidence backed by determination and sacrifice could move mountains or topple empires. The galaxy was free, messy, and chaotic, and beautiful in its diversity. And at the heart of that freedom was a simple human truth. When someone tries to put you in chains, you don't ask for permission to break them. You just handle it.